Democrat coming out of New York is reportedly considering sending a letter to the president, Joe Biden, who has a terrible golf swing apparently, seeking to get him to delay the sale of the $735 million sale in precision weapons to Israel as Israel is engaged in fighting off Palestinian terrorists. Republican Scott Perry warns of the Hamas caucus. I wonder who he's talking about. It can't be AOC and Rashida Tlaib and the squad. No way. What kind of bias would they bring into the equation and why they wouldn't want the sale to Israel? I can't put a finger on why they wouldn't want that sale to be done. I just can't get it. They're American, right? Perry warns Hamas caucus trying to get Democrats to abandon Israel. Yes, of course. Of course they do. As they compare what's going on in Gaza to our own borders, and AOC calls Israel the apartheid government. Sure. Israel kills 160 Palestinian terrorists last night and this morning and destroying suspected suicide submarine. The latest strikes come as more than 3,150 rockets have been fired towards Israel from Palestinian terrorists with Hamas and PIG. I'm going to say that one more time. The latest strikes come because 3,150 rockets have been fired towards Israel. 3,150 rockets. 3,150 rockets. AOC, do you hear that? What is the deal? What is the thought process behind this? There isn't one. You can't think logically through this. Yes, it's Israel being the aggressor, and Palestine is just sitting there taking the beating, and Israel isn't, they're not doing anything to Israel. What is the problem? 3,150 rockets have been fired towards Israel from Palestinian terrorists with Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad, known as the PIJs. It's the PJs of the Islamic terrorists. More than 450 of the rockets have fallen inside Gaza, and Israel's Iron Dome has successfully intercepted approximately 90% of the remaining rockets. What is the complication? I get there are civilians dying in Palestine, but whose fault is that? Is it Israel, or is it the fact that Hamas uses things like a hospital to hide its bases, or uses things like Associated Press to do the same dealings in the same buildings, or to do I see these videos of these kids filming as these tanks drive by them as they're like playing, and people are confused why civilians are dying. Because Hamas uses civilians as shields. They don't care. They only see one mission to take them out. They'll do anything and everything to do it. And it's a smart play to use civilians, but it's inherently and definitely evil to use. If you're going to use something like a hospital to shoot rockets out of, or to be a main base center, that's a very smart play, because it's harder for Israel to strike down a hospital than it is for them to just strike down a military base. There's moral compass. There's things you have to think about, but that's what they use because they don't care, because they're evil. Rashida Tlaib wants to back them up, saying Palestinians are experiencing their January 6th. Rashida, I'm so tired of people talking about January 6th like this was this massive insurrection that changed this country forever. As Democrats say, it was just as bad as 9/11 and what happened at Pearl Harbor and the Civil War combined, blah, blah, blah. Only one person died. Her name is Ashley Babbitt, and we still don't know who shot her or if he is going to be prosecuted. But that's okay. That's okay. It's not a part of the narrative, so we're not going to be outraged by it, as always. But can we stop pretending like January 6th was this insane thing? It was stupid. It was totally stupid. A bunch of people walked in there, took selfies, and stole computers. That was stupid. And it was just dumb. It was dumb. It was unplanned, and it made absolutely no sense. Have other people like Black Lives Matter gone into like the Oklahoma City Senate, the floor, and done things like protested? Yes, but do they get the same treatment? Absolutely not, because you're not part of the narrative. The Democrats have been waiting for Trump supporters to do something stupid, and then a bunch of people did, and then they pounced on it, and they've said and used it every single time for every single day, and they've talked about it over and over again. It's so boring. You know when a lie becomes so believable, they actually believe it? Yes, but it still sounds insane when they talk about it because it is insane. It makes no sense. That's why there's no weight, and that's why the arguments always run flat about how insane the insurrection was. Speaking of crazy, Spain mobilizes the army in the autonomous zone of Ceuta. I'm going to spell this for you. Ceuta, after an irregular entry of more than 5,000 Moroccans in 24 hours. They crossed using rafts and swam across Spanish military patrolling the streets of the autonomous zone. The Spanish police are going through the autonomous zones. These European countries and their autonomous zones where Muslims are living in, the people that have lived in Spain their whole life aren't allowed to go in there because they'll be shot and stuff like that. You guys are doing a great job preserving your country and making it safe for everyone. Great job. I mean, you see all those French generals and commanders come out and write letters against these zones and these places that you're not supposed to do, as French people are losing their country essentially. And could you imagine, let's just say, a bunch of Brazilians came to America, they established an autonomous zone, and Americans weren't allowed, and I'm not saying white Americans, I'm saying any Americans weren't allowed to walk into the zone, and in fact, if they did, they'd be raped or killed, and there's been rapings going on, and police struggle to go through there, and they're actually scared to go through there, and you just think that's okay. That's normal. Great job, France. Great job, Spain. You guys are doing great things. Space Force... I still love that name. Lieutenant Colonel Matthew Lohmeier, who was fired for criticizing the U.S. military for Marxism, claims he has infiltrated the ranks, Marxism in the ranks of Americans' military. Yes, we've seen all the videos. It makes sense. Of course they're doing this, and of course it's happening. But it's not okay, and it's not right. He spoke on Fox News this morning saying... they were taught the country was inherently evil. You're serving a country in the military, and you're telling military people this country is evil. But we want you to die for it, okay? So if we go to war, you're going to die for your country, and it's an honor. But just so you know, that honor is behind racism. Oh, I hate this critical race theory so much. And that... America was founded in 1619 and not 1776. Idiotas. And whites are inherently evil in our military. But it makes sense, though. I mean, Joe Biden gave that little nod in his last speech. White supremacists, white terrorists are the biggest problem, our biggest threat in our country. It's still one of the greatest lies he's ever said and one of the most evil things he could possibly say because it makes no sense. Let's continue to create these false narratives, these scapegoats, as they say. January 6th is a big problem and all these white terrorist supremacists are the big problem. Yet I've never met one and never seen one in my entire life. And the ones that I do see are called Antifa. They look more like white terrorists, white supremacists than ever. And Nazis. Don't say that. Why do you compare everything to Nazis? Because they align with a lot of things they say. They love separation. Critical race theory. The whole point is to separate and divide us. Because a country unified is strong. A country divided is weaker. So they want us to be weak. They like us to be separated. And people just drink the Kool-Aid. They just drink it up. They're like, yeah, this country is racist. Even though it's the least racist country in the world. Hey, don't say that. First ones to make it, to legalize, to get rid of slavery. Yeah, still racist. No big deal. Steven Crowder is suing YouTube over its content moderation and practices and policies, which Crowder says is misapplied to silence conservatives. Of course they are. Once again, like critical race theory, the point is to divide the country, to silence voices, to make it only one way. And when you hear people like Alex Jones talk about the globalists are taking over, it makes sense. You're like, wait a minute. They're all trying to make one voice, and they're getting rid of freedom of speech and red flag laws and all these other things. And white people are inherently bad, and the country was actually founded on this, and this country is evil. We need to dismantle the system. Everything makes sense. Speaking of system, law-abiding gun owners are one step closer to challenging the legality of the extreme risk protection orders known as ERPOs, commonly referred to as red flag laws. The Supreme Court on Monday ruled unanimously, this is reported by Daily Wire, that police illegally seized a Rhode Island man's firearms in violation of his Fourth Amendment rights. The SCOTUS decision overturned its First Circuit Court ruling that said police officers in the case were well within their right to confiscate the man's firearms. Red flag laws are a fantastic idea in your head, but the minute you think that you just have some neighbor who hates you and says, hey, I think my neighbor is mentally ill and I think you need to take his guns away from him, and has no basis for that claim, that's the problem. You just can't trust these people, and they're undocumented, unvaccinated people. You just never know who's got it. We've created a system of tattletales instead of leave me alone. Right royal pain in the a-hole, says Fox News' Sean Hannity as he goes after Prince Harry, for calling the First Amendment bonkers and says it allowed you and Meghan to accuse your family of racism. First Amendment is one of the most important things, and we need to protect it. And when I heard Prince Harry talk about it, yeah, that's why you came here. Because people die for it, you idiots. Freedom of speech is incredibly important. It's the reason our art is so much better. And that's the reason art has sucked in the last few years, because of people like you wanting to cancel people or said, hey, don't say that. That's rude, or that's racist, or that's blah, blah, blah. Just let people talk. Amazon is in talks to buy James Bond and the Handmaid's Tale movies as studio MGM for $9 billion. Amazon is like, $9 billion? We sneeze at. Here's $9 billion. Stalker kills himself. God, this story. Stalker, get ready for some bad news. Stalker kills himself in front of a shocked Fargo courtroom by slashing his throat with a pen or a shank in moments after guilty verdict. That's insane. Dude just killed himself in front of a courtroom. Dude, those poor people. Can you imagine being on a jury trial and just watching that? Oh my God. Speaking of oh my God, 18-year-old Darian Brown stabbed to death a 4-year-old child after snatching him while he was sleeping in Dallas. That is the most insane, psychotic story ever. It's incredibly sad, but people are losing their mind. I mean, it's just so. That's like one of those stories that like cuts you to the core, and just realize and allows you to talk about the evilness of man, and that evil is real. And people think, a lot of atheists don't have a category for evil. That's why you see things like, hey, we need to stop hate speech. We need to stop racism. And they don't understand that there's just evil people out there, and there's evilness out there. And you can't just tell people like that, stop being racist, stop being mean, put you in timeout. Here's a safe space, be comfortable. No, there's actual evil out there. People like Darian Brown, who snatches and takes up a 4-year-old while he's sleeping and kills him, stabs him to death and puts him in the street. There's evil. There's real evil in the world. Like Hamas. All right, now to laugh. Grace Jones, 32 years old, from San Diego, claims drinking and snorting and pouring urine into her eyes every day has cured her anxiety and improved her sight and helped her lose 30 pounds. God, jeez. For a turn of events, Grace Jones says drinking and snorting and pouring urine into her eyes Just like, I wonder what her water intake is. Maybe she likes it. Does she prefer a clearer drinking water or darker? MTV Movie Awards in memorandum segment, in the death segment, mocks Ellen DeGeneres in her reign of terror following an end to her show after 18 years of toxic environment, they claim. It's very funny, but it's also very messed up. And, when the left and the liberals are done with you, they are done with you. And today in history, in 1989, this story is very relevant. A crowd of protesters, estimated to number more than 1 million people, marched through the streets of Beijing, China, calling for a more democratic political system. Just a few weeks later, the Chinese government moved to crush the protests. These people want freedom. And yet, here we are in 2021 thinking, yeah, China's got some good stuff going on. Pete Buttigieg says, hey, we should look at China for what they're doing. As China is buying up, property and things like that here and taking over businesses and being like, oh, you want to go green? Oh, we won't, but you should to cripple your economy because we'll be better than you. China played the long game and we played the short game. Thank you guys so much for listening to the Derek O'Shea Show. I appreciate you guys so much. Hey, if you guys missed my live show last night on YouTube, you missed a fun one. I laughed my you-know-what off with my guest, Carissa. We talked about jokes, and we went through jokes, and it was just a good time. I haven't laughed that hard in a while, so be sure to check out the YouTube show that I did last night. It was like 2 hours long. Good time. Make sure you subscribe to me on YouTube and all that good stuff. Also, thank you guys so much for supporting the channel. Please be sure to share this on any social media platform. It's the only way I will grow, and it means so much to me that you take time out of your day to listen to me. Have a fantastic day, and as always, I'll see you on the next episode